Welcome, sales associates, and of course, sales professionals looking to rejuvenate their market, get it back in shape, and particularly those that are re-engaging the market on the back of some lockdown restrictions and things that have occurred. To Property Careers Pröspector School, and that's the whole aim of what we do here, is how do we get you in the first stages into foothold. That of course is breaking a new market, or breaking bad, as I like to say. And of course, those that might be looking to rejuvenating a market where you once had the foothold. And of course, we're looking to move from foothold to traction. So at this point in time, we're looking to get those seed listings, and then off those listings, turning those initial seeds into 2 more listings, and those 2 into 4, which of course is the next stage on or after this, and that is traction. In the last few weeks, we've spent a lot of time talking about, I guess there's a bit of a change in the market. So initially we started talking about the orientation. Those of you that are very new to real estate may not be familiar with this, but those of course who have been involved in the real estate market for some time would be finding that the market is, generally speaking, undersupplied in most markets. Now, this has had a little bit to do with lockdown and the restrictions that are all around, but also the fact that there are lots of opportunities for people to buy. Because there's been a lack of available listings, those that would come to market have been resisting doing so, fundamentally because they essentially have not had any property to go and buy. Now, if you look at it from their point of view, empathetically, you would most likely feel the same, especially when you have lots of agents in your ear saying that it's the markets or the prices they're obtaining are fantastic. This would have you thinking, well, it's easy to sell my property and I can do so at any time. Now, what are not a lot of sellers really take into consideration, and indeed a lot of agents, is that markets are relatively liquid and can change at any time. And whilst a lot of people might think that the stability is there and they can rely on the fact that they can sell their property relatively easy, and I'm not taking away from the fact that, markets are relative, but the fact of the matter right now is that although it appears stable, one would have to say that it maybe is not. Anyway, that's not the subject matter that we're talking about today, but it's really just to, I guess, substantiate, if you've been listening and you are subscribed to our YouTube channel on previous recordings of this, what I'm about to share with you today will make a lot more sense. Now, of course, if you're coming or happening onto this one and you haven't listened to the last 4 or 5 episodes, which I'll just give you a recap on in just a moment, a lot of what I'm about to share might not make that much sense. But the subject matter that we have today is talking about, once you've practically identified a seller, how you then activate that seller going forward, how you provide all of the fodder and material, particularly as it relates to the agency and the agency that you work for, that are clearly representative of value. Now, if you happen to be a sales associate that is supporting a sales professional, or you're actually in support to a top end, what we call a real estate rock star or a peak performance professional, or indeed you are a sales professional, and whatever opportunities you're looking to win, you are then looking to go and hopefully by invitation be called into a listing presentation. I want you to really get a very strong handle on the fact that the opportunity for you to build a perception of value exists in that moment between identifying a seller and actually going to the listing presentation. Now, I take this one step further in that a lot of agents don't realize that prospecting, the business of prospecting, is not just limited to locating sellers. In fact, that's just a small part of the battle. And one of the things I've been banging on about at different levels, certainly if you tune in tomorrow with our sales trainer online, or so list and sell online, where we're talking about the main thrust of that is the presentation and what you're driving. But you know, the big pitch there is for us to be very clear on, I guess, building a solid relationship long before you get to the listing presentation. Definitely with our real estate rock stars, we're trying to, as best we can, pre-sell that seller long before we get there. And we're in all the while creating a very strong, I guess, dissemination in value, or not dissemination, but a contrast in the value that we're offering against any competitive agent that's out there. Of course, in times like this, when it's difficult to get hold of listings, invariably, many agents will just resort to the notion and the idea of, sorry, I've just got to switch this off. The notion and idea of maybe entertaining a discount in fee, or perhaps even, again, entertaining the idea of, you know, giving away marketing or making it easy. So you've also may have already bore witness to the fact that a lot of agents are inadvertently running with the off-market proposition, which is kind of a contradiction if you look at it. If you spoke to any agent about winning the value game, about leveraging the value of a property, they'll nearly always say to you that this is done through great, they are calling it marketing, but which is the answer, but they might often be referring to advertising. Some of them even go on to say that the more you advertise the property, the more buyers you have, the more the competitive bidding, and this drives price up. Now, whilst that might be somewhat true, I don't rely on that, but nonetheless, this is what they're saying. So for agents to all of a sudden be entertaining the idea of off-market listings without investing in the marketing of the property. Now, from I sit as a marketer, I say if you don't enhance the perception of the property, you are literally running the risk of devaluing it. I find it a bit of a contradiction that a lot of agents are entertaining off-market listings, or even encouraging it, when all it's really doing, the reason that the sellers are taking up on it is because they feel like they're saving money, but nobody's actually paused to explain to them the risks that they're taking by devaluing it. Now, this opportunity exists for us once you've identified a seller in forging what I refer to as a personable relationship. So again, as I say, if you've been listening to these recordings over the last month or so, I started with talking about the orientation, so that when you do identify a seller, that you immediately drive the orientation of any discussions that you have with them around their motive, that you immediately move to, in identification, once you've identified them as a seller, where are you moving to? Where are you coming from? And I guess then just like sliding up, propping your chin up, whether you be on the phone or in front of them, and just listening, allowing them to, I guess, relay to you the dilemma. And this is how they often see it, of wanting to move, but not really knowing how to broach it. And unfortunately, if they listen to most real estate agents who are pretty much saying that the market's fantastic, prices are high, they're easy to get on, well, they're naturally going to think, well, that part of the equation's easy. The one I really have to worry about is where I'm moving to. So invariably, they start to say to agents, well, I would put mine on the market, but I can't seem to find something to buy, and I can't secure that, and I'm not prepared to do anything about it until. That's okay if you just drive your conversation. Don't push for a listing presentation. Certainly don't push for an appraisal or an evaluation. One of the things I'm often saying to real estate agents, and I'd like you guys to understand that, whether you're at the beginning of your career or you've been at it for some time and you're trying to understand it, I can confidently tell you that if a seller actually wants an appraisal of the property, that's all they want. They just want you to come down and tell them what you think it might fetch. This is not 100% true, because there aren't many things that are 100%. But generally speaking, if that's all they want, that's the total limitation, and they're not in any way moved if you start to mention buyers or otherwise, I can comfortably tell you that those people are most likely not selling at all. That they are just, as most property owners are, interested in where the property sits in terms of its value. And by virtue of the fact that they're not out researching the market themselves, they are not what I would refer to as an active property seller. They're actually a dormant property owner. Nonetheless, so you should always be seeking, and this is how you can actually qualify someone fairly readily once you're trying to identify them, is just talk about where they're moving from. So for example, I was on the phone this morning with Sophia Tui, who happens to be one of our sales associates that's working in support of one of our top end producers, one of our real estate rock stars, Justin Hicks. And, this morning she's run some open for inspections over the weekend. They've got extraordinary responses to these. The first week out for 3 of them, one of them had around 40 odd inspections of buyers that came through. The other had just over 50 buyers that came through right in the heart of their service area. And the very first thing I said to Sophia is, we have to focus on these. And she said, why? I said, well, how many sellers were there? She said, well, look, I was offering what we call the property sellers research guide for those that we're talking through. And she said, I didn't get many of those away. I said, but yeah, that's probably because you had a big crowd in. And imagine if you're standing in a queue and the agent's asking whether you're looking at that property as a seller rather than a buyer, you're probably not going to go along with that story because you don't want all the other people behind you to know that. And you kind of feel a little uncomfortable attending an open for inspection, not as a buyer, but as a seller, looking at it and comparing it to your own. But what I do know is that 1 in 7 of those people, it's the first open for inspection, 1 in 7 are actually looking at that property as a seller with the idea of wanting to compare it to their own before considering putting theirs on the market. And as I say all the time, once you've identified these people and you're getting these numbers in, what you are focused on doing is building what we refer to as your active property seller list up to 25. So herein lies a fantastic opportunity for Sophia to do that, to get those numbers up, and that's what she's focused on right now. But once you've identified them, stay away from the idea of, can we come down and give you an idea on price, or can I get my guy, my sales professional lady, so my sales lady, to come down and have a look at it? No, what we're looking to do is activate this seller. And the best way to activate them is to stay or remain calm around the fact that you've identified a seller, and then slowly but steadfastly allow them to gain confidence through the relationship we form with them to the point where they start to ask our advice. Because what we want to be giving is advice, not price, because price is, and if you go back to previous recordings, you'll understand that that's probably the least important. It's not unimportant, but it's less important than satisfying the motive. People move for reasons, not necessarily for money. And even if they are focused on the money, it still has a direct correlation to whatever reason they are selling that property for and what they're going to be doing with that money on the other side. So we talked about the orientation, then we talked about making a connection. And what I said in making a connection is that you need to, from a rapport perspective, is drive the conversation, as I've already said, around the motive in the first instance. Secondly, around the property that they live in and what's going on with that, or as you said, back to the motive, what they're trying to do. And thirdly, about driving the conversation in and around the client themselves. So the less you talk about yourself and the more you listen to their story and about them, the stronger the chance of building that relationship. And we then talked about, creating a service orientation, which I'm going to reflect on right now and build on, about activating those clients, moving them forward. We also talked about the regeneration, which I've just shared with you. That was one of the things I talked about, with the open homes and how you run those and how you set up the invitations to get the sellers to come out and view it, what you then do at the open for inspection and how you utilize the property sellers research guide. And then finally, that other one at the end, how you actually then qualify them. And this is one we were talking about this morning again with a bit of a giggle. And I said, well, what you do is you ring them and, you just automatically identify if they haven't contacted you on the back of the open for inspection, that there's a very low likelihood that they liked it, because if people are looking to buy, most buyers of a property, if they attend an open for inspection, will show some indication at the open for inspection as to whether or not they want to come back for a second look, make an offer, take a contract, whatever the case might be. So on the Monday, when we follow up, and please try to stay away from this idea of following them up on the same day and that afternoon. Of course, if there's a buyer there and they've indicated as such, you would call them on the same day. But the others, I'm quite comfortable leaving them to the Monday morning, because you can then move in with what we refer as the assumptive close. And this is about identification and, again, building your active property seller list. So when I'm calling them on a Monday, the call basically goes, hi, it's Mark here from ABC Real Estate. We met at an open for inspection at 16 Lovers Lane on the weekend. I won't ask you about this one, because if you liked it, you would have told us on the weekend, huh? Yep. Now, I recognize there was a cast of thousands there on the weekend along with you. Now, my understanding, you guys were selling, weren't you? Now, that's an assumptive close. What they have to throw back at me is, no, what gave you that idea, which is fine. Or, yes, that's right, which is perfect. And I've now identified them. Or, oh, I'm on to you. You're just trying to flush out whether I'm a seller. And if I get caught, I get caught. But basically what I'd say is, you guys are selling. If they go, no, what gave you that idea? I would just say, look, I'm sorry, I'll just adjust my records. So not selling anything at all. That might then elicit them saying, well, we are looking at selling, but we need to find something first. Again, I've got that identification and I move from there. Remember that in qualification and identification of sellers, the best techniques that you can use are ones that work on assumption, where you might have to be corrected, rather than interrogation. So bringing it back, it's always about interrogation. Swipe that. It's always about conversation, I should say, not interrogation. So you want to run a conversation rather than interrogation, and that conversation needs to be centric to them, what they're trying to do, what their needs are. Put your ideas, put your aspirations away. I know that a lot of you from time to time feel the pressure that you might be getting from a sales team leader, that you might be getting from a boss, to actually get those listings in play. But just remain calm around this and just focus steadfastly on building a personable, not personal, a personable but yet professional relationship, where people understand that this is a commercial transaction. You are going to give value in terms of professional services and create that relationship built around that premise. So then last week we talked about recalibrating, that, some of you after a while, and this is why I sort of reiterated a couple of those things just a second ago, especially as it relates to the follow-up and open for inspections and making sure the invitation goes out and what you do, and with the property seller's research guide. But our first job is to identify. And right now, because we are we're smack bang in the middle of the last quarter of the year, Christmas is almost upon us. So at the moment, the building of that APS list, that active property seller list, is absolutely paramount, that you need to get that, I would hope, to somewhere around 25. And once you've got the identification, you don't have to worry too much about the rest, but make sure that you've got a list of 25 active property sellers that you are paying attention to. And then what I do with them there is I move in to creating a service-based platform that will activate those sellers and bring them to me, where they invite me down and I can win their favor. And it also provides a tremendous opportunity for you to represent the value that your product has. And this, especially if you're working with another salesperson, when they get down, there'll be no pressure on them, I should say, to discount fee. There'll be a lot of understanding as it is around the marketing and how it works. So you can avoid a whole lot of things by utilizing that time to make sure that you're vesting time in conversation, representation of your product, good, strong conversations, looking for opportunity to give advice rather than price. So it is that we say, once you've built that list up, now to activate them, we need to run a service regime. So we've identified 9 particular things we do in what we call the pre-list phase for APS, active property sellers, where you are giving them, for want of a better way of saying it, an entree to everything that your company provides and what you do as a consummate professional, so that when you get down there to do the presentation, you're 3 parts of the way there. I can almost assure you that your competitors are doing not much more, particularly given that the times are lean, that they're ringing up these people and all they're saying is words that account to or sum up to, are you ready yet? Are you ready to get your property on the market? Or you should, because the prices are fabulous, they're selling easy, blah, 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 blah. Little wonder people are making these assumptions. And as I've said over and over again, selling properties is the easy part. Finding a buyer for a property is the easy part. Finding a buyer that pays their premium, that's the difficult part. And that premium can often be well above the comparative value, which is only subjective. So what I want you to do is focus on this. I implore you, if you are working hand in hand with a sales professional, so if you're a sales associate and you're working to support them, or you're even out on your own or you're relatively new, maybe talk to your sales team leader about this. But you need to build, once you've identified them, in rapid fire fashion. Timing I'll leave up to you, depending on where you can gauge how soon people want to move, but you need to start sending stuff out to them. In the first instance, APS 1, the first thing that we do is we send them a property seller's research guide. Now, this could be for your company if you don't have the property seller's research guide, if you're not a subscriber to our platform on this. You could have a pre-list kit or something, but you need some sort of document, some sort of representation that states what your professional services offer, what your product is. And you need to get this out to them straight away. Now, I understand that if you work with us and property marketer and your office is one that subscribes to our platform, that you may well have used this document to qualify them at the open for inspection, or you might have gotten that out to them beforehand. That's great. If that's out to them, that's fantastic. Those of you that are in companies where you have the electronic version, you can come back because you might have given that at the open for inspection or otherwise in hard copy. I still recommend that you send the electronic version out, because from there they can order a comparative market analysis, they can ask for further advice, or they can even book a listing presentation with a sales professional. So that's pretty good too. But once that's done, you then move to the second part of the equation, and that is to send out to people in real time SMS texts that relay your sales results in real time. Now, this is important that you do this. What you want to do is, as your company is making sales, you want to be able to make those sellers aware that properties are still moving. Because the most bizarre thing that happens is, if a seller is reluctant to put their property on the market, it could be because it's not okay with their timing, or they wrongly assume that properties aren't selling, or they can't seem to find one themselves, and they think whatever's happening to them could be happening right across the board. This is greatly alleviated by showing them in real time that people just like them, their properties are selling, properties are still being bought. And this also, so it's demonstrative of them that things are still moving forward. And, you know, I even send these out to people I already have listed, but that's a conversation for another area. But at the moment, you want to be sending that out, and they're seeing this happen in real time. We then move to step 3, and this is to prepare, despite the fact that we say inside the property seller's research guide that comparative value is not much more than a benchmark, an opinion, a history lesson, a reference point. We still send them some information out around this. So we formulate a comparative market analysis. It is devoid of any opinion that we might have. Again, if you're brand new, that I ask you, you do this in consultation with the salesperson you're working directly under, or indeed your sales team leader. And we just formulate that with the cover letter that we have prescribed. It's no good to you if you don't use the Property Sellers Research Guide, but you're welcome to have a look at it if you get in contact with me. And then basically what we do is we send that out to them. This becomes then a platform for more conversation with them. That's step 3. The next one that we do is we openly invite them to come and attend one of our open for inspections. So if you have an open for inspection coming up and you've identified someone who is a likely seller, we formulate the invitation. We then put a cover letter with that and we shoot it out and invite them to come and check out our welcome home, as we call it, so that they can see the contrasted difference. Now, if your welcome home, if you're open for inspection, is no different to that of your competitors, then there's not going to be much ground gained by doing this, which I hope the message is already there. You need to create a welcome home. You need to create an open for inspection, which, as I just said, we've formulated into the open home, welcome home, that clearly is better than that of the competition, so that they can see, should they list the property with you, that the service they're going to get around this is conducive to not only leveraging their price, but creating an experience for the buyer and presenting the property in its best possible light. So my open for inspections always were better than that of the competitors. It was an experience. I'll go into this in more detail, but if you go back on previous recordings of this, I talk about the fact that they look, when I look at them, when I'm listening to them, yeah, when I'm smelling them, yeah, when I'm touching and I'm tasting them, they are entirely contrasted to that of my opposition. So I appeal to the 5 senses, and they have lots of things in them. When you turn up, you know, we use the word welcome for a start. They're quite inviting. You come in, they all have the same playlist. They have a scented candle that's, you know, signature to that, to my company, so that people know that they're in that open for inspection. So they hear, they smell, what they see is greatly contrasted. It's a welcoming experience, and especially I gear them perfectly to the incumbent seller, because I've always understood that it doesn't make any difference to a buyer when they come to an open for inspection once they see the home. Of course, as long as the property is presented in its best possible light, they're going to see the value. But to the next seller, I always know that they are watching that listing, especially if they're very close to that one, and making judgments around the company. So they are geared to win the imagination of that incumbent seller. So we want that to go out. Now, if you send that invitation out and you send it with that cover letter and they don't turn up, that still doesn't matter. It's the fact that you've invited them. And all these things now are starting to add up to your advantage. Look at it from the seller's perspective. They've made contact with you. You've made the conversation centric to their reasons for making the move, what they're trying to do on the other end, what they're trying to do with their property. You've been very empathetic around that. You've offered advice rather than price. Your conversation always is centered around their motive, the property, and they themselves, not talking about yourself. This is conducive to creating good rapport. Yeah. You are then, you know, they received the Property Sellers Research Guide, where we talk about all the virtues of actually getting a professional involved. They're receiving an SMS text once or twice a week at a maximum about properties that are being sold. They've now received a preliminary comparative market analysis, and that's formed in a better platform, good information and good conversation around that. You've invited them to come and see an open for inspection. And this is where I start to make the big point. There's more to come, but here's where I make the big point. You know, what you've got to do if you want to win a customer over once you've identified them is see yourself the way they see you. So often I see an agent make contact, they find out that someone's wanting to sell, and all they do is they badger them about wanting to come on the market, rather than recognizing that they've now got their attention, and all they need to do is allow them to see their product in action, learn more about them, and then they will see the value and the distinction against the competition, and this then creates the opportunity. If all you do is the same thing as the competitor, all that's going to happen is all that's going to be left for them to make a decision is based upon who's quoting the highest price for the property and who maybe has the most competitive fee. And you want to stay away from that. The next installment that we then do is we show them something around our marketing. Now, I'm very keen for people to be looking at what we call the 2View platform. This is where for any listing that we have come on board, we create a subdomain that has its own address that is related to the actual street address of the property and opens up their website and drives inquiry back. Now, because people that subscribe to our platform of Property Marketer can have this FOC free of charge, this is yet another feather in the bow that you can send out an example saying to that prospective seller, should you put the property on the market with us, then this is also available to you. Again, another advantage that you will have against the competitors if you put it out there. Next thing we send out as our newsletter, we call it the Market Roundup. I say that this needs to be limited to very short, sharp information in less than 100 words. It needs to answer that first question that most property owners have, for that matter, not just property sellers. How's the market? So in less than 100 words, it tells them generally what's going on inside the market, and then goes on to answer their second question where they'll say, well, what's my property worth? What's it doing at the moment? So it gives them comparable sales and activity inside the market in a very easy to read format that they can gravitate toward. So we shoot that out. Now that needs to be very lean, very straight to the point, but also needs to arrive at the same time each and every month. And again, you can just send this out electronically. We then want to show them our accolades, any recommendations that you have. Again, if you're very new to the industry, I'm sure if you talk to the sales team leader or if you're working under a salesperson, just use their recommendations and always be looking for opportunities to continually improve on the volume of recommendations that you have, but then just cleverly send them out. Now, if they're coming from you and you're working and supporting a salesperson, that's easy. You can just send them straight to those clients and say, just what you want to know about the most recent sale that we've made and what one of our clients had to say about John, who I work with, or about Mary, who I work with. Just get those out there because those accolades are so very important. We all then move to case studies. Again, I implore you to have a chat to me if you're not too familiar with how the case studies work and what we do around those. But that's number 8. And then last, but by no means least, send them information. Again, if you have to consult with the salesperson you're working with or go to your sales team leader, please do so. And I basically ask them about specific buyers that we have for the property, or even if I know them myself, put them in front of them and shoot these by name out to the seller, then have a conversation with them around the specific buyers that you have for their property should it come to market. This has a double effect. First up, it will alleviate if competitors are talking about an off-market arrangement, it will present that same opportunity to those sellers and they will kind of lean upon that. It definitely shows evidence of the fact that you already have buyers. And I think this is very, very important that real estate agents don't bark on about having to get money from people to find buyers, that you show that because you're a good, strong agency, you already have access to buyers that are ready-made. It doesn't dilute the argument for investing in marketing. I don't think it does. It at least shows that you have them. And again, if you look at it from the perspective of that active property seller that you have identified, you've given them 9 passive contacts that aren't the same as you just ringing them, which can sometimes turn into a badgering, and you will activate these property sellers positively. Now, if you follow this formula that I'm showing you at this time of the year, first and foremost, put all of your energy into building your identification so that you've got an active property seller list that has at least 25 sellers on it, moving through to the end of October as we move into what we refer to as November. I'll be talking about this next week when we talk about bringing December in to November and making it one big 7-week month called November. And you will have the platform to not only have a very successful end to the calendar year, but move into the festive season and have already identified, nurtured, and built a strong contingent of sellers that will enable you to start the new year with a bang and set up for a productive year that has fantastic continuity. We'll be well past the stage of foothold. You'll be moving into traction, and the new year will bring with it an advancement in your career, the likes of which you probably didn't imagine possible. My name's Mark Dwyer. You can reach me at Mark with a K at propertycareers.com.au, or you can telephone me on +61 410 592 165 if you'd like to have a discussion about how we can get you into a foothold inside your market and move your career in leaps and bounds into the space of being the producer that you'd always promised to be.